Are you in the mood for an intervention? No, unless it's a close family member on OxyContin or heroin. The prevailing wisdom seems to be no, at least with the Ukraine. Stay out of this one. Come on. The differences between right and left as to how we should best respond are very subtle. We could actually have an elevated national discussion about Crimea. Don't look now, but you might agree with your common adversaries about Russia's overreaction, how we got here in the first place, and what to do about Putin. People are fighting for their freedom and paying with their lives, but that doesn't mean we need to sacrifice American lives watching Russia do what it's always done. But what now? Let's talk about that. That's where we come in. We are the Independents. Hi there, I am your host, I'm Kennedy, and welcome to the Independents. I'm joined by Reason Magazine editor-in-chief Matt Welch and Kmele Foster from Freethink Media. Between the three of us, we think it's on. This is the Independents. And let's go first to the escalating crisis in Ukraine. GRN reporter Jared Morgan is on the ground in Kiev. He joins us by phone. Jared, I know it's very early in the morning there. Thanks so much for being with us.
There's no problem, Kennedy.
All right, so Jared, tell me, does it feel like you're in a war zone?
Not yet. It's very much a phony war, if you like. If you are to believe what is being reported, in 1 hour's time, maybe Ukraine and Russia will go head-to-head. But these reports of ultimatums being delivered by Russia are not confirmed, so we don't quite know yet. Russia confirmed them, then denied them. So in 1 hour's time, it either blows up or nothing happens.
No, we've heard reports of Russian soldiers coming over on ferries and weapons depots being stormed. Have you seen any of that in Ukraine? Have you seen any Russian troops?
Not in Kiev, no. In terms of Crimea, it's definitely happening, but at this stage, it's definitely an occupation. It's not a war. It is an occupation by stealth and by simply numbers.
And how do people in Kiev feel about that?
Apprehensive, but at the same time, Crimea is a very different beast to the rest of Ukraine. So people here are basically carrying on with ordinary life.
And does ordinary life still involve protesting? Is the government still in flux? What feeling are you getting from people on the street? Are they going about their daily lives, or are they still stopped throwing bombs, protecting themselves behind flame barriers and fighting for the freedom of their country?
All of that has stopped. It became very much about mourning those that had died. Once the regime left, more than a week ago, almost 2 weeks ago, it was about mourning the dead. And so in terms of what is happening on the ground here, we're seeing a parliament that is moving very fast, despite what Russia thinks of its legitimacy. But in terms of day-to-day life, it is continuing.
All right, Jared, we're going to keep our eye on the unfolding, the very fluid situation. Thanks for joining us, and get some sleep if you can.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, it is a serious topic, being on the brink of disaster, but we need to bring in our party panel to talk about this, see where we agree. A woman who's as beautiful as the sunrise and right as rain, it's Noelle Nikpour. And picking up the slack on the left, it's Democratic social commentarian Steve Laser. In 2012, when Mitt Romney and President Obama were rattling their swords and exchanging harsh words in debates, Obama made Romney look downright inconsequential with this remark when Mitt brought up Russia as our greatest threat.
Russia does continue to battle us in the UN time and time again. I have clear eyes on this. I'm not going to wear rose-colored glasses when it comes to Russia or Mr. Putin.
In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
He's so smug. I feel like Tom Cruise, and the president is my Matt Lauer. You're glib, President Obama, all right? Now, if you set the Wayback Machine to 2008, you will remember a very feisty, bloviating Joe Biden promising a vastly different foreign policy when Putin goes a-shooting.
We've once again seen the consequences of the neglect, of this neglect, with Russia challenging the very freedom of a new democratic country of Georgia. Barack and I will end that neglect. We will hold Russia accountable for its actions, and we will help the people of Georgia rebuild.
Yeah, how's that going for you? Real good, then. This brings us to our present conundrum. Is the Obama mission any different from that of other recent sitting presidents? And was Mitt Romney more of a Cassandra than we'd previously thought? Was he looking into his crystal ball, free of rose-colored glasses? Did he glimpse the future? Or was it really slut-shaming on his part?
My favorite comment about Georgia and Vladimir Putin mucking about in his near abroad was from John McCain, actually, the 2008 campaign, where he said, I looked into his heart and I saw 3 letters, KGB.
And maybe he was right.
And he was
pretty tough.
He was right about that, but he was wrong and hysterical about a bunch of other stuff. He said that the invasion of Georgia back then was the most serious threat to our, the international security since the end of the Cold War. Well, no, it's not. It's somewhere in between. Russia is trying desperately to go out and find its lost prestige. Vladimir Putin exists as a political figure, as someone who will heal the wound somehow magically, which means he won't ever do it, in the Russian psyche for having the Soviet Union break apart and having some of these stranded kind of republics that have a lot of Russian speakers in it drift off and kind of drift towards the West. He hates that and will try to block it whenever possible, knowing that and being clear-eyed about it and realizing that it happened under George W. Bush. It happened under Bill Clinton. It's going to happen over President Biden or whoever we have next. And no matter what we think about our own omnipotence,
just you saying that, it made my throat sphincter tighten. All right, Kmele, what do you think about all this? I mean, is Putin out of control, or is he doing what he's just designed to do?
Well, it's anybody's guess what game Putin is playing here. Is he trying to distract from a very bad economic situation at home, or is he actually trying to secure Ukraine in order to make certain he's got a very clear pipeline for the fuels that they so desperately need to sell? I'm not sure. What is clear is that the United States and the European Union have very few options here. They're certainly not going to do anything militarily. No one wants a war.
Now, is there anything, Noelle, is there anything the president can do to not look weak when he's dealing with Russia?
Well, the problem with that,
he really does have very limited options.
Well, the problem with that is he already appears weak, and he appears weak not only to Russia, but to the rest of the world. I mean, you remember when he first took office back in the day, he did the apology tour, went around, apologizing and bowing to leaders and on behalf of the United States. And I think that Putin, who knows what he is going to do. And the question of it is, I think that he's going to do whatever he feels like he wants to do because he is viewing the United States as weak. We have a national debt that's through the roof, number one. And number two, we're talking about slashing the budget of the U.S. military. And I think that that is one of the things he's like, go ahead, talk all you want, because that's about all it is empty threats and promises. So I'm going to do whatever I want.
We spend a great deal more than them. I think the bottom line is that no matter what the president had done, there is almost no circumstance under which even a President Romney would have actually done much different at this particular stage.
I mean, that's okay, Noelle, to Kmele's credit, that's why we actually have so much agreement on this issue. I mean, we could try and make you guys disagree with that. We could poke you with hot sticks, but you'd still essentially say the same thing under duress.
Yeah, I think that the president can actually do something pretty concrete here. Russia is really dependent on their exports of petroleum and other similar products, 33% of their exports. I think if we do an embargo on Russian oil and gas products, I think it would trash their economy. Just the threat that the rest of the world would do something.
But doesn't that hurt poor people in this country? I mean, that does mess with the cost of oil worldwide, including here.
Well, if you're going to make them pay
a price, it would be a problem for Europe. They could just turn off the pipeline to Europe, who desperately depends on that oil. So I'm not sure that actually makes a tremendous amount of sense for
everyone. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to break down for you.
We have to do that in conjunction with some of our friends in the Middle East, the Saudis.
Here's what we got to do. We got to forget the Saudis. We got to forget Russia. And two things. One, this is a win-win for Vladimir Putin. And I'll tell you why. If the West bullies him, it only creates a greater divide. The Cold War benefits him. All right, and if he is more aggressive, and if we allow him to be aggressive, if we don't bully him, then he wins because he's the aggressor and proves that they're the hegemon, they're the sole superpower. The other thing is we have to get off foreign oil. We have to get off domestic oil. We need to use technology somehow. Screw Al Gore. The point is there has to be a better way of fueling our cars and our lives and our planes. And oil is not it. That is so 20th century, and we can get rid of these despots altogether, cap them in the knees if we focus the technology which we have, that is our greatest asset in this country, and find a better way. Thank you. Are you a parent? What better gift could you give your kids than to send them to a school that fits their needs? The charter school debate rages like a hurricane. Take away some lessons from one big city that's come to fight. All right, and next, should you be able to sell your body to save someone's life? The courts say yes, but wait till you hear what the government has to say. It's coming up next on The Independence.
Like thousands of Americans, Doreen Flynn's 3 daughters have a deadly blood disease and need a bone marrow transplant from a stranger. But there is a serious shortage of donors.
I have 3 daughters that have Fanconi anemia, and it's a pretty terrible disease, and right now it's pretty much wrecking their blood.
Tens of thousands have died because they couldn't find a donor, and at least 1,000 more die every year.
It's so tragic and stupid. Welcome back to The Independence. Whether it's organs, blood, or other fluids, if you're selling your body, I have a fistful of ones. By the way, you just saw a clip about a case that has the courts saying it's okay to sell your bone marrow. There can be compensation, but the Department of Health and Human Services apparently thinks that it's okay to make their own interpretations of the law. Should you be able to sell bone marrow? It's not exactly an organ, despite what HHS says. It regenerates, and it is something that can save lives, especially for people with things like blood cancers. That is the bottom line. And here to tell us more about the case of the squashed marrow, it's Jeff Rose. He's a senior attorney at the Institute for Justice. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Kennedy. Thanks for having me.
All right, it's great to have you back here on The Independence. Tell me about this case.
So this is a big case we launched in order to save lives and change the world. And basically, what we have is a national bone marrow registry where people sign up to give bone marrow altruistically. That's what the law said you had to do. We challenged that because bone marrow is like every other valuable thing. If you pay for it, you get more. And like you said, bone marrow is different. It's not a solid organ like a kidney. When you donate bone marrow, it grows back. So we challenged that law, the National Organ Transplant Act, and we won. But now, as you said, the Health and Human Services is coming after us.
Yeah, and this is so insane because I know a lot of people, my mom suffers from lymphoma. I know a lot of people who unfortunately have died, whether waiting for stem cell transplants, they couldn't find a match for bone marrow transplants. I do team and training. I raise as much money as I can for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And there are people out there desperate for matches when it comes to bone marrow. We try and get as many people as we can to sign up for Be the Match, but there just aren't enough donors. Now imagine if you gave someone $10, $20, $200 just to sign up, how many donors, how big you could make the pool, and how many lives you could save.
Really, and the key thing is that people get onto the registry and then they sort of forget about it, or they move, they don't stay in touch. And so what we want to be able to do is offer an incentive that if you are called to come in and be a marrow donor to save someone's life, you do it, and you do it now. Because if that person needs marrow, they are on the brink of death. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to pay a person for that.
And you can extract it from blood, right? I mean, this is not something, they don't have to dig into your bones. It's not a painful process like it used to be, which, should be more reason. There should be an even greater incentive to find more donors.
That's exactly right. Marrow cells are really just baby blood cells. They're blood cells that can grow up and be any kind of blood cell. And now with modern technology, we can take those cells right out of your arm. It's as simple as that. And so what we want to do is pay people for their time and their inconvenience. Federal law said that makes you a criminal. You can go to prison for 5 years. We got that struck down, and now HHS is rising like a mummy to sort of lumber towards our clients again, and we're going to have to take them back to court probably.
Jeff, speaking of court, is there any plans for IJ to take on the actual organs out there that are prohibited by law to sell, kidney and other things that would save lives right now?
Right, there's no lawsuit planned on that because there really is a bright line between kidneys, which are solid organs, they don't regenerate, and regenerable bone marrow. Now, IJ is into constitutional lawsuits, and that bright line makes a difference for the Constitution, but it doesn't make sense as a matter of policy. Congress needs to change the law.
And Jeff, is there any rationale for permitting doctors to collect fees for performing procedures involving bone marrow, even organ transplants, and not permitting the patients themselves to recoup some sort of money for the time that they're investing in giving away these resources?
Not at all. You know, when you set the price of something valuable at zero, it doesn't make it worth zero. That just creates opportunities for other people downstream to be able to appropriate the cost of it for themselves. So the fact is, doctors get paid a lot of money when they put in an organ. Hospitals get a lot of money when they put in an organ. Other specialists get a lot of money. And all we're saying is that the donor is part of that process, and there's no reason why the donor can't be compensated just like everyone else is compensated.
All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. I mean, I hope that we find cures for all these ailments so people don't have to donate bone marrow. But until then, there's so much more that has to be done. And thank you for that fight.
Thanks, Kennedy. Appreciate it.
All right. Very good. Coming up next, how happy are you with your kid's school? Would you be happier if you at least had some other affordable options? Most people don't, but for those who have access to charter schools, they are often a godsend. Why would any one mayor want to shut down what's already working? Hell, I don't know. But if you want more, I want more for you, baby. This is The Independence.
I was so glad to have you standing back by my side. So proud of what we were doing on me and you and a bottle of Bucky.
Mouth trumpet at Fox. That's all I'm saying. Not trying to be a braggart, but welcome back to The Independence, where our BS meter is buzzing. Maybe it's because we are at ground zero for bureaucracy in Manhattan. All anyone wants is for their kids to succeed and have a better life. And one of the simplest solutions to break up the mundanity of learning is having more and better choices where you send your kid to school. It's a scary prospect, putting your kids in one school for years at a time. What if it sucks? What if you're hit with that powerless feeling that something better has to be out there beyond your reach? For a lot of parents, that better thing is charter schools. It's certainly no magic bullet against selfish unions and unspeakable bureaucracy, but at least it's a model that gives parents input and the ability to somewhat customize their kids' education. But not in New York City. Mayor Bill de Blasio is shutting down 3 charter schools that could give parents and kids new ways to thrive. You don't have to love it, but at least give them a choice if they want to investigate that. Why is the mayor doing this?
Because he had to sop to teachers' unions like any other Democratic politician has to do to succeed in New York City and increasingly this whole part of New York State. You cannot win an election without influence of the teachers' unions. Teachers' unions despise all kinds of charter schools, schools of choice, all this stuff. They think it's hocus pocus. It's a way to tell unions what to do and teachers what to do. They hate it, and so he has to come up with some trumped-up reasons to kick out schools, namely that, hey, they're free riding off of existing public schools. Here's the problem for him, though. He's going to do this, and he's going to realize that actual residents of New York and people who have their kids in the city school system, like I do, they like to have their school choice. So he's going to have to selectively shut down schools, particularly in neighborhoods where people don't really care about. And that way he'll have a scalp for the teachers' unions. He won't do too much because Bloomberg had established a very large charter school system in the city. And I think he'll probably stop there, even though he would like to go much further.
And he's also coming up against the governor of the state of New York, who happens to be a fan of charter schools, who might come in and, like universal pre-K, might swoop in on the state level and save the day.
That's right. And Governor Cuomo is actually in the vein of what is happening right now. The acceptable rationale for opposing charter schools is, well, they take money away from public school systems, and that money is desperately needed to actually make regular public schools work well. But what we know over the past 30-odd years, we've tripled the investment in public schools, and the results have been frankly, very, very bad, either flat or declining results in all of the ways that matter. And what we've actually seen happen with de Blasio is we are shuttering a school like Harlem Success Academy, which is not only one of the better schools in the city, it's one of the better schools in the state. It is a phenomenal educational institution. And now we don't have, it's not just 3, it's actually 4 opportunities for kids to go to better schools that will no longer be available to them as a result of this change in law.
And let's keep in mind, the New York City school system was a joke. I mean, it was a national disgrace. They had rubber rooms everywhere. There was always a huge blowout article in some magazine talking about what a disgrace it was. They started to change that. There are some good public schools out there. It's a wonderful thing, competition.
Okay, but if they were so bad, why would parents be falling all over themselves to send their kids to charter schools? Because parents talk to each other. And when your kid has problems and you're an involved parent, you want to find a better way. And if you have other parents that are saying, oh, my child went to this school and had this much success, all you want to do is move your kid out so they have more options, so they're not stuck in a soul-sucking box, because that's what school becomes for so many kids, and it's so unfair. What we do to children is unconscionable in this country.
Here's what happens with parents who send their kids to charter schools. The test results are more or less the same, maybe they're a little bit better, but the parents are so much more happier about the whole experience. They feel like the school is responsive to their needs. That's important. I mean, critics of charters say, well, it's basically the same results. No, it's not. The parents are happier by 20 percentage points.
And that means they're more involved. And when you've got parents who are involved in their kids' education, kids are going to thrive, because that means that the parents are going to sit there, they're going to do homework with their kids, and they're going to be guardians along with the teachers. It should not be about the teachers' unions. It should be about the learning. But again, in this argument, that is completely lost here. All right. What is the secret for eternal youth? A really great one-night stand, perhaps? Sushi, 8 hours of sleep, and the most kissable lips this side of Kyoto. The topical storm is next. Welcome back to The Independence. I hope you brought your appetite. It's about to get supernatural in the topical storm. I don't know what that has to do with hunger, but it's going to be delicious. Topic number 1. Australia is no stranger to dangerous beasts. Between sharks, box jellyfish, and giant spiders, pretty much everything there can kill you. Last week, we did a story about a surfing crocodile, which apparently had the reptiles just pissed. An angry snake took on a crocodile in Queensland, and you'd think the croc would come out on top, because with its giant size and pervious skin and massive teeth, who's going to eat a crocodile? This guy. This snake ate this crocodile. It's not a drug hoax. This is why we live in cities and not billabongs, people. I love Australia. I've been there, but I may never go there again.
I'm not going to go there in the first place. My God.
Holy cow.
Don't you say they also have like rodent-eating spiders in this place as well?
Oh, yeah. No, they've got massive spiders. In fact, there was one in a door jamb next to my daughter's head as she was playing with the door, kind of opening it, and it was... it was like 700 pounds. It was the size of a softball.
Is it talking like Robert De Niro? Hey, what are you doing over there?
That was what are you doing over there? That's not right. I want to eat your child.
I listened to the interview of the woman who took these pictures, and apparently her and her family routinely swim in these very same waters. They're very brave, bold people.
Yeah,
that's the way of putting it.
Scared of the
probably wouldn't do that anymore.
It's more of the snake that gets me, right? My husband hates when I do my Australian accent. I don't know why. I think it's super charming. Topic number 2. We knew this day would come. Beer wasn't going to be the king of mind-bending commercials forever. And I've always wondered, what would the first marijuana commercial look like? And would some guy try to sell me sushi?
I got the finest sashimi this area has seen in years. You need me and I need you. Let's make this work. You buy some sashimi, I'll throw in some rice paper, man. Totally free, gratis. I got everything. Even California rolls, baby.
You wouldn't buy your sushi from this guy. So why would you buy your marijuana from him?
What kind of accent was that? Seriously.
But the weird thing is I've totally bought sushi from him. Had a great Saturday night. I'll have you know. Is that a new euphemism?
That is disgusting.
That might be the last, the first and only pot ad, right? Because what's going to happen, no one thought to have pot ads before. It kind of wasn't on people's radar screen. So they haven't like set up all of the prohibitions on marijuana advertising. They're starting to do it now in Washington and Colorado and all this kind of stuff.
Well,
so enjoy it.
And now Jerry Brown is calling everyone potheads. Nah, the potheads aren't going to run the state, says Governor Moonbeam. Oh, wait, that's me. The thing that I will tell you, future pot commercial makers, don't make them when you're stoned. Something like that, okay? Topic number 3, an adorable 116-year-old woman has some sage advice for those willing to make it past the century mark. Sleep 8 hours a night, eat sushi. Those are at least 2 things that can help any healthy body leapfrog into the next 100 years. Masao Okawa was born in 1898. She was having her first midlife crisis when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And now she sneak attacked her way to being older than Yoda. She says you have to learn to relax. This coming from a woman who already turned 100 when 9/11 happened. Doesn't she have a succulent, kissable mouth? By the way, that's Angelina Jolie in 20 years. There she is, gorgeous. I'm not wrong about that.
I am going to attend the George Burns School of Longevity, I think, which is just cigar smoking, late nights, lots of liquor. Seems to work.
Liquor.
With 100 years, why not?
Topic number 4, North Korea is a dump. People are starving. It's a fascist, nepotistic regime crushed by cruelty and international sanctions. But they do have a zoo. And what is more attractive to starving children who pledge their allegiance to a baby-faced tyrant than a cement enclosure filled with miserable Yorkshire Terriers? Holy shit, Zoo! That sucks. The Central Zoo in Pyongyang says the dogs are learning several feats, one of which I'm guessing will be mass suicide in the coming year. These poor bitches. Yeah,
Oh, totally appropriate.
and all 100% true.
That's right.
I think that in 20 years there will no longer be zoos in civilized countries. Aren't zoos kind of awful and
Oh, yes, just disgusting. Ew, I saw blackfish and I'll never go again.
Yeah, get out of here, Matt Welch. The zoos are great. Zoos are great for kids. They're great for the animals. Those animals are safe.
They give you an appreciation.
Yeah.
They'll be like the Olympics. It only happens in Sochi.
That's right. We're moving all zoos to Russia.
Now,
Good job,
every reason to
Vladimir.
go.
The Oscars are over, and now you have to try and get that red wine stain out of the dress before you return it to that snobby boutique. We have a special recap, and we can help. Next on The Independent. Welcome back to The Independents. Let's crack open the champagne and rehash the Oscars, shall we? Ellen, Jared, Frozen. So much to discuss. Our party panel has reconvened. Welcome back, Noelle and Steve. Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello.
Okay, very good. So Jared Leto had a beautiful speech last night. I am so moved by his career, whether it's My So-Called Life, his band 30 Seconds to Mars, or his life-changing turn as Rayon in Dallas Buyers Club. He won that statuette and had some nice words. Take a look.
She was a high school dropout and a single mom, but somehow she managed to make a better life for herself and her children. And I just want to say, I love you, Mom. Thank you for teaching me to dream.
You're welcome, Jared. You don't have to pretend like you were talking about your mom. I'm right here. Some people criticized him for bringing up Venezuela and Ukraine, but I thought his speech was pretty punk rock. And also, John Travolta, was he drunk? Did he not read the prompter before he stood in front of 2 billion non-Russians?
Here to perform the Oscar-nominated, gorgeously empowering song, Let It Go, from the Oscar-winning animated movie Frozen, please welcome the wickedly talented one and only Adele Dazeem.
Just spit it out.
Adele Dazeem. I love her. I wish they could have gotten Idina Menzel because she does a glorious version of that song. I'm so glad I got to watch that again because I was watching it live. I had been waiting for that moment for about 3.5 months.
Yeah,
now.
we know. In the hallways. You want to do your air trump?
Oh, God.
Anyways, No, he almost tripped up on Gorgeously, too. Like, he couldn't do any. You watched the whole show. I watched the whole show.
it.
We were both,
yeah.
tweeting.
What drinking game were you playing, by the way? Because there were so many.
It's like Every Time You Cry with Joy.
Oh, Lupita.
Lupita's dress, which
It was amazing. It was Prada.
But how many presenters couldn't read the prompter? Like they didn't know who was supposed to go.
Yeah.
It was
really
it's that much stuff.
It's harder than it seems. The monitor is real far away. You should actually read the stuff before you say it. Charlize Theron, she stumbled over her words at one point and she's like, "Oh, is that me?" Yes, it's you. You're highly paid. You've won an Academy Award. You've done this before. Did you watch the show?
I did.
Did you have a favorite moment?
I think, I can't remember which one it was, but
because he didn't watch it.
there were these two guys from France who won an award, and they gave a really nice speech that I thought was fantastic.
You should have heard my French wife impersonate them before they came on. Like, thank you very much. And then they were even more pronounced than she was. It was
I like the Lopez's when they won for Let It Go for Frozen, and they had their speech coordinated and timed and choreographed. It was perfect.
Speaking of Frozen, I am going to go there. I'm going to bring this up. Kim Novak. You know what I don't like?
So bad for her.
But let me tell you what I don't like. It's not her, but the doctor that actually told her, this looks really good, let's add more. I mean, who would do that?
Vladimir Putin.
Well, there you go.
No, and it was, she's 81 years old,
Yes.
and I was looking at her going, I know you look messed up, but for 81, you actually look pretty good. But she cannot move her face.
No,
that's the problem. You gotta.
She's had a lot of medical issues, though, too.
And she's had cancer. She's had
to make it worse, she announced the film, and I was like, please don't say Frozen. And she did. Frozen.
Frozen, right?
Although that was the moment that
Frozen.
I was happy that Matthew McConaughey was there with her. Of all of the crazy people, to be next to her to kind of like
It was
soften
good.
the blow.
Yeah, he gave her some of Lance Armstrong's old juice.
I like the trend in Hollywood, though, for people to go natural. You know, there are a couple of folks that you can clearly see that haven't done anything to themselves, and you know what? They look fine. There's
Like
nothing
Goldie
wrong
Hawn.
with it.
Did you really do that? I love you.
No, but who are you talking about?
Yeah, the 14-year-olds.
They interviewed him at the very beginning, and of course now I'm going to forget his name, but the comedian who was in Caddyshack.
Bill Murray?
Bill Murray.
He definitely looked natural.
He looked natural.
No, he's
there was
awesome.
nothing wrong with
I
that.
love Bill. Bill Murray can do no wrong, and he and Harold Ramis had a big rift at the end of Harold Ramis's life, and it was sad
Oh, that's
that
too bad. I
as
didn't
far
know
as we know, they did not reconnect, and Harold Ramis admitted to an audience that he had had many dreams for years about Bill Murray, and it just didn't happen, and Bill Murray gave him a very touching tribute.
How about Gravity winning all those awards, and then Sandra Bullock at the very end? Nah, she didn't get it.
Yeah.
But she's already gotten it, and she had a great performance. But you know, when you're up against Kate Blanchett,
She was
and Meryl Streep, and whoever
Biggies.
in that category. Yeah,
Biggies.
I mean, those the biggest dogs of the litter.
Yeah.
Right over here. Of course I am. All right. Well, Noelle and Steve, thank you very much for being here. From the Ukraine to the Oscars. We do it all on The Independent. Coming up next, a man who says President Obama will do nothing of consequence about Ukraine. And then we're keeping it Kmele. Are you your brother's keeper? Kmele is The Independent.
Really did.
Welcome back to The Independent, where we have our fingers so firmly on the pulse of Ukraine, we might have a digital contusion. What's really going on over there? Is it a CIA coup? Are the chickens coming home to roost? Is Bad Vlad our invention due to decades of misguided foreign policy in Russia? Buck Sexton, that's his name. He joins us. He's an ex-CIA superhero who has the ability to both fly and become invisible. Welcome back, Buck.
Thank you for having me.
So what the hell is going on over there? I mean, we have strong opinions about what the United States should do, our interface with Russia. But what is going on? Give us some deep analysis, Buck Sexton style.
I guess I'm going to join the chorus of people that think they're the second coming of Talleyrand, because if you've been on Twitter or just turning on the TV lately, everybody thinks that they know exactly what needs to be done in a situation that is honestly and legitimately very complicated, and very complicated from the U.S. perspective as well as from the Ukrainian.
Okay, is it complicated geographically, or because you're talking about two countries that are armed to the teeth with nuclear warheads?
That pretty much, yeah, that's high on my list of things.
It's high on my list.
We have to keep.
You don't hear a lot about that right now.
I mean, people say that this is out of the Georgia playbook from 2008 when Putin went in there, but the fact of the matter is nobody even cares or knows what happened to South Ossetia in this country, or Abkhazia, those two little breakaway provinces. They're very small. It would be sort of like a little sliver of Vermont and a little sliver of New Hampshire going to the Canadians. I guess people would sort of forget about that. But 45 million people in Ukraine is a much more substantial issue, especially because the pipelines that Russia feed, go right through there, as well as just the fact that it's a major exporter of wheat and grain. There are things that would affect global markets. On top of that, there are enough guns and enough people there that even if the Russians decided to play particularly nasty, things can get out of control very, very quickly. From the U.S. perspective, I just think it's better that we're honest that we're not really going to do anything. And when you look at the things that have been trotted out by the Obama administration, the options on the table, banning visa bans, that means individual visa bans, seizing some assets abroad, sanctions, there's not going to be any sanctions because without Russian gas, Germans can't heat their homes, and it's wintertime right now. So that's not going to happen either. So the notion that we're going to play this really constructive role here is false. I think President Obama is terrible in foreign policy, but I do have to say that in this one instance, to pile on and make it seem like he's missed some opportunity to be the U.S. cavalry coming in there, laying a smackdown, and no. That's not going to happen.
I mean, you have pointed this out and make the case now that this president is doing what every other president has done, other than Reagan.
I mean, Reagan didn't have to deal with Russia meddling in its near abroad. Well, I guess Afghanistan counts, but that wasn't exactly the same thing. Now, I'm interested in the CIA role, since you have a little bit of knowledge in that, and you hear a lot of chatter about this. Like, I think Americans have a very ethnocentric, narcissistic view on this. What does this thing say about us? And so we think there's a great report by Eli Lake last week talking about how CIA analysts, the day before Russia sent in troops, said, I don't think that we're going to be sending any troops over there. We think our best intelligence on the ground says that's not going to happen. And then the other CIA piece I want to ask you about is you hear a lot of people say, okay, this is the Western part, the whole revolution, the anti-Yanukovych protests and all this kind of stuff is all just basically a CIA plot. What's your take on that?
Well, the first one about the CIA being wrong is, yeah, that happens, unfortunately. They get things wrong. And this actually ties into the next question, I think, which is the CIA probably has a handful of people that actually speak Russian at a level that they could even try to pretend to be able to be a man on the street in this area. It's very hard to come up with folks who can blend in that way, especially in places like this where folks tend to know who's around them and everything else. So, yeah, they got it wrong. I think that that's unsurprising. A lot of the analysis that makes its way up to the top policymakers is very watered down. There's not a lot of, quite honestly, the heavy lifting gets done at the bottom by the folks like me who are writing it, and then by the time it makes its way to the president's desk, all the agencies have weighed in, and it's sort of this slop.
But don't you think it's sort of insulting to Ukrainians to say, you know, you couldn't possibly want a revolution. You couldn't possibly want to redirect your government. It's got to be a CIA coup. Well, we run the world. We hold the puppet
why would we want this? I mean, think about it at that level, too. I mean, assuming for a second that there was some sort of hidden U.S. hand, which I don't believe there is at all, but assuming that there was for 1 second, we can't control what's happening now. It doesn't look good for the U.S. It makes the U.S. look weak on the international stage. President Obama, I think, is tying himself in knots just to look like he's even keeping up with the events over there, never mind actually directing them. So we're going to rip the genie out of that bottle. If anything, we've learned from Egypt, from Libya, from Syria, that we got no idea where these things are going and no way of controlling them.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything the president could do to look strong on this issue?
Well, a good rule of thumb would be not to declare, after the Red Line fiasco with Syria, not to declare there'll be consequences, go on TV on a Friday, and then a few hours later, Putin's like, thanks for that. I'm going to go invade Crimea now with troops and basically tell everybody that they need to surrender and we're going to steal your ships. So that would be, I think, a lesson the administration may learn at this point, although they didn't learn it the first time. Looking strong is going to be very hard because Putin has essentially a winning hand on the ground there. There's not a whole lot that we're not going to, the military thing is totally off the table. Everybody knows that, right? So the fact that we have the biggest, most powerful military in the world in this instance is not particularly useful to the plot. Oh,
diplomatically, economically, what do we have?
We have diplomatic pressure, which means essentially we're going to try to get together sanctions. Never going to happen, by the way. We're going to try to seize some assets of some corrupt Russian oligarchs. There's more where that came from. There's a big connection in Russia between being a political oligarch, or being a politician rather, and being an oligarch, which means you're a billionaire.
I want Abramovich's yacht, by the way.
I want one of those guys' jobs. So that's not going to do very much either. There's not really much because they have fossil fuel. Europe is fossil fuel dependent on Russia, and they still have nukes, guys, and we're not really going to do anything about this.
I'm telling you what they got to do. All the people in the Europes, they got to buy the Teslas, okay?
That's one option.
Right.
I've heard that one.
That's good.
You're friends with Leo, aren't you? Because he likes that.
No, he loves the Tesla. You know why? Because that's a sweet-ass car. Buck Sexton, thank you very much.
Thanks for
Deep analysis done right, only on The Independence. I have one question. Are you your brother's keeper? Kmele will answer for you. You don't have to say a word. It's The Independence. Stay with us.
We know that Latino kids are almost twice as likely as white kids to be suspended from school. Black kids are nearly 4 times as likely. And if a student has been suspended even once by the time they're in 9th grade, they are twice as likely to drop out. And that's why my administration has been working with schools on alternatives to the so-called zero tolerance guidelines.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, latino. Thank you, Mr. President. This is The Independence. The world is not enough for one of my cohorts, and when it gets to be too much, we have to keep it, Kmele. That was our president talking about his latest initiative, My Brother's Keeper. Kmele, what the hell is that all about?
Well, this is an aggressive new program by the president, which is not really the creation of a new entitlement, but it is an attempt to address a number of social ills, a panoply of social ills, if you will, that apparently correlate with race.
It was a super anti-Asian speech, by the way.
Well, the difficulty, I think, for the president and advocates of this policy, who are both on the left and the right, is apparently in understanding that simply because there is a correlation between people's races and poor socioeconomic indicators or outcomes, it doesn't necessarily mean that you understand these things in a racial context. I think there are 2 big problems here. One is that by understanding it that way, and I'll only give you one because we don't have much time, but the bottom line is that by understanding things in this particular way, it almost suggests that, well, if we had the exact same absolute number of students that weren't getting out of high school, but the racial diversification of that particular group of non-graduates was broader, then we'd all be happier here. And that's not the problem. The reality is that these problems are not narrowly confined to race, and the solutions themselves don't actually correlate to race or correspond to race either. So I think that's the misguided assumption that programs like these are rooted in, despite the fact that they're well-intentioned.
I'm glad he at least mentioned lifting zero tolerance policies, which aren't really his purview, but he's rhetorically right. And I think if you went in that direction of saying, okay, what is the government doing that's actually really hurting people's lives, right, it might get you to a good place like, oh, I don't know, stop prosecuting people for drug offenses.
All right, well, we will get into that in the after show. If you are feeling conflicted about your evolving feelings on foreign policy and other issues, don't. You are in the middle of a maturation process. It's good to change. You're going in the right direction, and we will help get you there. Go to our webpage now for our after show as we say goodbye to a beloved member of the Independent staff. It's going to be a hard one tonight, but you got to join us for the after show. For Matt and Kmele, I'm Kennedy, wishing you a very good night. Here I am.